We're live. Hello, reader friends.
Hello, reader friends.
Hello, alive and kicking.
Yes.
Yes, on a Friday.
Yes.
Thank you, Srdja, for coming on our show today.
Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure.
Absolutely. So if you guys don't know, Srdja Popović is the author of Blueprint for Revolution. I will say the subtitle: How to Use Rice Pudding, Lego Men, and Other Nonviolent Techniques to Galvanize Communities, Overthrow Dictators, or Simply Change the World. So yeah, we read this in January, if anyone watching is unaware, and absolutely loved it. And we reached out to Srdja because we just had to talk to you, and we're so excited that you're here today.
Happy to be with you and glad you liked this little book.
Awesome. Great. So we wanted to just talk to you about everything to do with your book and your work, and just kind of like get to know you. And also you have such an interesting perspective that like we just are in love with, and we want so many more people to know about, as far as how like you can have community, have people power, and, you know, do awesome things like overthrowing dictators or changing the world. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
Happy to be with you and answer your questions or questions from audience, or I don't know how this live thing works. I'm mildly technologically retarded. Mildly.
We're not too much better, but we try. We have a chat. If you're in the chat, reader friends, please leave us your questions. We see that Boyce is in the chat. Boyce was on our live stream discussion for Blueprint for Revolution. So if you have any questions for the author, Boyce, put them in the chat. Yeah, very good. Hello, Silver Talon. Thanks for guys for checking in. Srdja, where are you, by the way?
I'm in a sunny state of Colorado, in a beautiful place called Colorado Springs, the hour and a half south of Denver, maybe, where I moved with my family late August, early September. So Be afraid, the Serbs are coming.
To Colorado. And Colorado's cool. I have not been there in a long time. I'm in California, like Southern California.
So you are sunny with mild rain, and we are at the edge of the polar vortex now. But it's Colorado. It's polar vortex with blue skies, you know.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, I've never been to Colorado, but I always see pictures and they always look beautiful. I'm in Maryland right now, also very cold at the moment.
All I know about Maryland is that it is romantic.
Romantic.
Yeah. There is a hotel in a small village of Serbia called the Romantic Maryland.
Oh.
Been there. It's not very romantic hotel, but you get the idea of Maryland.
Yeah, very romantic here.
Very cool. So you have now 2 books, and you also have Canvas, and you also helped overthrow a dictator in Serbia. So, you know, what should we talk about? I don't know.
I don't know. Let's start with, you know, it's like there is this amazing format of putting the public narrative together, which says the story of me, the story of us, the story of now. Okay. So let's try to structure it that way. Hi, I'm Srdja Popović. I used to be a bass guitar player in a rock band and then a student organizer in my early 20s. And I grew up in a very interesting country called Yugoslavia, which was known for its Coca-Cola socialism, which means you have one party in power, but you have Hair the Musical, the punk new wave, and all of the cool stuff of 80s available. And when I was growing up, and this may be interesting for your readers or whoever listens to us, we were at a very similar place as you guys. We were kind of content with our middle class life, more into making music and getting out and well, in my case, fishing. But the thing is, like, we thought that activism is a boring thing for old ladies who care about cats and dogs. So we were living this prejudice that, it's somehow very distant from us. But situation makes a hero. And that we got into the really, really crazy period of late 80s and early 90s when a guy named Slobodan Milošević came to power in Serbia. If you Google him, your first reference would be the Butcher of Balkans. So it's like a lot hearing that name very well. And within the range of a few years, what used to be a normal middle-class life in a medium communist country turned into the upside down. We entered 5 wars. First, a little war with Slovenia, a bigger war with Croatia, the durable and bloody war with Bosnia, slaughter on Kosovo, and war with NATO. So that was only 8 years. And in this 8 years, the fabric of the society fell apart. The economy fell from solid middle-class income country into the second largest hyperinflation in the world. The family ties fell apart. The people were leaving country en masse because they didn't want to be drafted for Milošević's war, including my own brother. The music fell apart because the new brands of music were promoted by new people in power. The social values fell apart, and so on and so on. So when you're in early 20s in this type of situation, obviously you have 2 choices. You have flee or fight. And very big part of my generation was too stubborn to flee. And we decided to fight back. So starting from 1992 and then into 96, 97, and then into 1998, we were working on building the nationwide movement, first run by youth, and then involving almost everybody else, called Otpor, which is the Serbian word for resistance. And the idea was, if we can mobilize enough people, if we can build unity, if we can organize around the strategic planning, then Milošević will lose elections, and we will caught him cheating, which he did, and then we'll be able to mobilize people to get rid of him. That event eventually happened in 2000. After these dramatic events of my student days, I tested waters in changing the beast from the inside. I went into Serbian parliament and a bit in a government for the first 3 years of transition. And then in 2003, the groups from across the globe start coming to us and saying, oh, we've seen this on TV. We want to do this at home. So this is how we started working with, groups from Belarus and then Zimbabwe and then Georgia and Ukraine. And then it became the world story. After the Georgia and Ukraine, we decided to create an organization. 2004, we formed Canvas, which stands for Center for Applied Nonviolent Action and Strategies. And this is basically my daily job for the last 15, 17 years of my life, educating activists across the globe how to build movements, building tools. You mentioned 2 books. We have bulk of manuals, a lot of video materials. So basically empowering people to build social change movements. We upgraded it to the universities. We started teaching here in Colorado College in Colorado Springs, ending up being on graduate programs in places like NYU and Harvard. But basically, we built an academic leg of the whole thing as well. So this is what I do for a living. People come to my organization. They seek knowledge on how to do the positive social change. We end up working on plans and workshops and enough about me.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I mean, I have to say, I was feeling pretty lucky that you're here.
Yeah, for sure. We were, we mentioned this before, but we first heard about, the story of Outpour in This is an Uprising by Mark
It's an amazing book.
A very, very good book, very thorough history of nonviolent uprising. But that chapter was the one that both Kateri and I, we fell in love with that chapter. And so we felt super fortunate when we found your book, but then even more fortunate when you agreed to come on here. We wanted a manual that normal people could read and understand and create change. And, with the Yin Yang Book Club, one of our favorite things to say is knowledge is power, but only if you use that knowledge and turn it into action. And so this book, I mean, we're very happy to have you on here, and thank you so much for telling us a little bit more of your story. It's always great to hear.
Once again, this is straight to the point. One of the reasons we are passionate about the social movements, nonviolent movements, and one of the reasons why books work and why these book clubs are very important is that very often you find a big, huge gap between the knowledge about stuff, and there is a lot of stuff done in academia, for example, on social movements, and what you can apply in your life. So you see all of these big stories. You may be following Belarus or Burma, where you have two very large, vivid movements happening, and say, how this implicates my life in Maryland. How I can use, like, this is, I don't have a dictator, I don't have a large movement, police is not arresting us, how we change little things. So a passion and idea behind the Blueprint for Revolution, with the great help of ingenious New Yorker Matt Miller, who actually helped to put it together, was to make something for hobbits. And that comes from another book that was my personal Bible, which is Lord of the Rings. And one of the reasons why I was a big fan of Tolkien as a kid and never stopped getting back to this book time after time is because it's a story of small people. And in the Lord of the Rings, for those who haven't read this book, please do read it. It will change your life. Plus, it's a very good read. And don't think that watching movies is enough. It's not. The book has so much more to offer. This is a story about the journey of fantasy creatures called hobbits, small, laid-back, common people like three of us, though most of them have hairy legs, so it's more like me, not like two of you. But laid-back, love nature, love to eat, love to drink, love to have fun, love to smoke pot, all of this marvelous stuff, and they hate adventures. I mean, this is who they are. They love their country life. And then the wizard comes in, this typical fantasy plot of, having the big story and then somebody being thrown into the vortex of world events and all this kind of stuff. And then you have this journey of different people, and that connects the book with the movements. The more diverse people you have in the movements, the more you're likely to succeed. And then you have the wizards and elves and dwarves and people in shiny armor. But actually, it's the hobbits who ultimately win the game. And connection is really clear to social movements. Social movements are far the best vehicles for common people to influence things. And throughout the history, it was the hobbits who carry on the struggle for, racial equality, gender equality, LGBT equality. Hobbits who run the struggles for democracy in places like Serbia or Belarus. Not elves, not dwarves, not wizards in shiny armor, or Ivy League educated people. We are talking about hobbits. So one of the reasons why Lord of the Rings has a big place in my book and a big place in my life, but also it relates to the social movements very much, is that you want to change things and you're a hobbit, you will do it through the social movement. You won't go through the political party or the big business, which tends to favorize kind of elites. You would rather go into the social movements where your ideas, your commitment, and the people and power you can bring to the movement really counts.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of that really resonates, I think, with our community. Megan and I were people who are not politically active or interested in to much extent at all before. And this kind of relates to the chapter in Blueprint for Revolution, which you call Vision of Tomorrow, I think. But, we were kind of presented with this idea that, a guy called Andrew Yang had, and it really kind of blossomed into this thing that was even, bigger than him, which was this idea of a actual thriving and healthy, but, still kind of normal society, and so we like to say we were radicalized by a book club. And yeah, that kind of is our goal, to just keep this a really community focused space. We do stuff we even just give like creative writing prompts and ask people to do creative writing, and we post it, just stuff that keeps it very like centered on us as normal people and what we want, and the visions that we have. So yeah, I think all of that probably really resonates. And I know that there are a lot of Lord of the Rings fans in our group, and we need to read that book.
We'll add it to the list.
Yeah.
The ever-growing list.
Right.
Speaking of that, I think when you take a look at the different movements, like the first distinction, and it can be organic, between the protest is what we somehow identify with the movement. So these are the two very different things. Mm-hmm. The protests are normally reactive events. So something pisses you off, you go on street and yell to really make it into a cartoon. Where the movements are around the values and the vision and the idea of the end of the journey. And of course, you don't start the journey if you don't know where you're going. And very often people get sparked by anger. Another really important book in my understanding of social movements was Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. And Alinsky outlines the importance of anger and how it incentivizes people to be active and agile about stuff as opposed to be just spectators, but also says that the anger per se is a destructive force. So aside of just anger, you need hope. So you need to cope your discontents with the idea of what may be the alternative reality. And the way the book is structured, the way the workshops that Canvas does across the world, the structure is around this idea that first you need to know where you're going. So you're looking at your battlefield, you're looking at potential constituencies you want to mobilize, but moreover, you need to constantly ask your question, if I'm a Hermione Granger or Harry Potter for a day, what will be different? So it's not I'm pissed off with this, but if I have a magic wand to touch it and it changes how it looks once it is changed. And what connect these two is a strategic plan for your travel and the stray of small victories, which is kind of, getting up the Empire State Building, which looks like a very desperate adventure if the elevators are not working, but it's still doable if you break it down into the small portions and you say, okay, it's a very tall building, but I'll do like 7 floors every day. And once you get to the 7th floor, you celebrate your little victory, you shake hands, you open sandwich or whatever you have on the run, and then you go 7 more and 7 more. So people very often see social movements as the explosions of mobilizing. But most of the social movements really have this emerging phase where you have a person or an idea which comes out, and then the core groups comes around it. And then it has a little bit of a what we call engagement phase, which is where you grow in numbers and you find your path and you, whatever, if you're a Harvey Milk, you decide you're going to run for the local office. And then you look at these small victories one after another, and then through these victories you're growing numbers, because there are events which create exponential growth in numbers. And not to dig any deeper than 4 years ago, you had probably the largest single protest event in the history of the United States, which was the day when your previous president was inaugurated. And when you take a look at the numbers on the Women's March, these were really impressive. And a number of people from all walks of life coming in, and celebrities and all this kind of stuff. But if you are not ready for this moment, and if this is not a part of your strategic plan, and if you don't capitalize your mobilization with organization, it's not going to be a lasting movement, which is exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. So when you take a look at these things, you're not looking like there are these two phenomena that Blueprint looks at, is that you have this mobilization and the organization. If you want more of a new age language, mobilization is like water. It comes in waves and tides. So you have people mobilize, numbers are growing around the stuff, and then they deflate. And sometimes they are sparked by event which may be positive, or it can be shocking or negative, like the nasty assassination of George Floyd was last summer. And then you have a large waves of people getting around it. The question is, can you build a durable movement by building an organization which will carry on the mission once the tide is down? And where this organization will be ready for the next tide to build on the next tide, because this is how you change things. So I very often disappoint people who think that, this is somehow a bliss. Actually, it's a hard work that requires a lot of planning. Successful movements require a lot of planning, and together with vision, building unity and planning in your struggle are the principles that connect social movements, where there are local movements to keep your mayor accountable for a quantity of dog's poop or garbage on the street, where this is a larger thing, keeping somebody accountable for whatever, 2.5 million people in Texas sitting in cold without the electricity, where this is a nationwide movement which will end up the segregation in schools and toilets, or this is an international movement which tackles such a large thing as a climate change. So this is just scaling, but the principles are the same. You will never clean your street of poop if you can't envision this, if you can't find the allies in your street, if you can't build a little organization around this, if there is not a little strategy, and if the tactics are not properly organized, you will never change the way the world sees the climate change if you don't do this in a larger scale. But the scale doesn't matter, the principles matter. And this is what we learned working with probably 50, 60 different groups from across the globe, ranging from activists opposing the military coup in Myanmar or Sudan, or people working on local campaigns to tackle homelessness. Because we had students from all walks of life. And every time you start by outlining these principles, once again, this is a book club. Another interesting book, 46 pages to read, is Art of War by Sun Tzu. So nonviolent change is very much like a war, except you're not using the violence. And except the nonviolent discipline is one of the key principles of success, not only because the violence is less moral than the nonviolence, it's also because the nonviolence works better. And it is proven by scholars. So what Sun Tzu teaches you is know yourself, know your opponent, and know the terrain. And you will know the outcome of the 1,000 battles. So probably the first step, if you're looking at social change or whatever, getting Andrew Yang elected as a mayor of New York, whatever is your mission, you want to take a look at the constituencies. You want to take a look at the people that you need for this journey to be successful, and you need to listen. The difference between the movements and mainstream politicians is that politicians need you only once in election cycle. Every 2 years, every 4 years, whatever. So they need to tell you, they need to make you energized about their vision, and they need to put your trust in them so you vote them in that one day. Or for a little duration of the campaign, let's say 2 or 3 months. For a deep social change, you need to listen to your constituencies, and this is where you can really create the movement consistent of the people, and this is where you can do the amazing things and unexpected things, and I mean there is no lack of cases across the globe, but listening to your constituents is a big difference between the mainstream politics and social movement politics.
Yeah, definitely. Megan, do you have a question?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess speaking to all of that, I wouldn't say that our book club is exactly like a social movement yet. But I guess one of our biggest questions, and this kind of goes back on to, what you were saying earlier about like the importance of book clubs, is what do you think a book club can do to change the world? And of course, we hope the answer is a lot. But in your mind, like what is it that a book club can do to change the world, or can it change the world?
I think the book clubs and every type of educational element of social movement is the key. What Gene Sharp teaches you, and he's a father of whatever theory of nonviolent resistance, is basically you have 6 sources of power in the society, starting with authority, continuing with human resources. Remember, numbers matter. and then going into material resources and sanctions and intangible factors. But the sixth one is particularly appealing to the book clubs. It's skills and knowledge. So the more you build knowledge and skills of people, the more you're likely to win. The more you build on the talent and interest, buy books, buy educational videos. So investing into skills is actually the best investment a people power movement can make, because the more people know, the more effectively they're likely to work. If you take a look at whatever, I always like to use the case of movement very dear to my heart, which is called Extinction Rebellion. It is now international, started in UK, really interesting climate change movement oriented towards direct action, non-cooperation, sometimes even physical intervention. You would place it to the little bit more radical wing of the environmental movement, comparing to the more mainstream organizations like Greenpeace, or more mainstream movements like Fridays for Future. But when you take a look at the first thing, what they do when they recruit you, there is a librarian in the movement, which equips you with certain books to read. So clever movements invest into skills and knowledge and interests of their members. Mm-hmm. And I know that I discovered that by being contacted from somebody from the movement who read The Blueprint for Revolution, which is, together with This Is an Uprising, one of the top 5 books they recommend to the new members. So speaking of this, like, clever movements have this component. And whether it is a form of a book club, or it grows into the form where, from just discussing books into implementing tools and becoming a training component of the movement, this is all very useful and very helpful in terms of educating people, because the skills and knowledge, they matter. The more skilled people and more knowledgeable people you have in the movement, the better the chance to succeed. Not to mention that training different layers of leadership within the movement, especially operating in place with an authoritarian government, will make your movement survive potential decapitation. So what happens when you're fighting the structure, like military junta in Thailand or whatever, the oppressive government in Belarus, you're fighting a very hierarchical opponent. And hierarchical opponents think hierarchically. So they think if they just can get on the leaders, the problem will be solved. The more layers of leadership, going all the way down to the neighborhood committees, you can educate about the purpose of the movement, the background of the movement, the skills that they need, the tools that they can apply. The more it's difficult for your opponent to dismantle your movement by targeting the top person or the top 5 persons or the top 300 persons. We had 2,500 arrests in a 20,000 people movement. That also included a lot of the people from the inner circle of leadership. The reason that it didn't help Milosevic to contain the movement was that, the local branches knew what the mission is, they knew what the general strategy is, they had numbers spread in every neighborhood, and these numbers were trained to carry on the mission. And so, taking the generals of the picture didn't really influence the foot soldiers, if you want to continue this military analogy. But having your troops educated and passionate and well-trained really helps.
It reminds me of what was really dove into in This Is an Uprising with Opor, because it really talked about the way that you trained your chapters, and that you sort of, it was like you gave them this basic knowledge and this vision, and these are like the kind of some like basic structure and rules, and then it was sort of like, do with that what you will. From my memory of reading that, like, do you think the book like captured that element really well? And is that something that you do you sort of, as with Canvas, like train everyone kind of in that specific way, or is it more like open to however a specific group of people feels they should run their organization or their movement?
The process is that you basically, using the biblical analogy, that's another book worth reading, whether you are a believer or not. Using biblical analogy, you teach people how to fish. You can't catch a fish for them. It is highly unlikely that any foreigner can tell you what you should be doing in order to, oppose the Lukashenko government, or what you should be doing to win the mayoral elections in New York or whatever. The thing is, there are tools, and we spent 15 years refining these tools to be user-friendly. So what we're looking at is the group comes to us, they want the kind of the guidance, and very often they're like, oh, what we should do. Instead of going and telling them what they should do, which is against the policy of Canvas, by the way, but it's also very dangerous just to think that because you're super smart, somebody else should apply this in Belarus and get killed. So it's like you don't want to do this for moral reasons. You don't want to do this because it doesn't work, and we are not doing it. What you can do is to give people tools, and then depending on their needs, you're applying different tools. So there are some tools that all movements need. All movements need to understand the spectrum of allies. So this is the first exercise you go is mapping your society. So where are these numbers that you need to mobilize? The second, how you craft the vision of tomorrow, which must be the smallest common denominator. Some negotiation skills are also very important for movements because very often these movements are unlikely coalitions. So take a look at the Polish Solidarity movement, the iconic movement and the Soviet occupation in Poland in the 80s. It was a very weird coalition of urban intelligentsia, blue-collar workers in shipyards, and Roman Catholic Church. Not really the people you would expect to see in a bar around a beer. But what unites them, they wanted an independent Poland and they hated communism, so they find this smallest common denominator to work on. And so that means the skill to agree, but also skill to agree what you disagree is very important. And second set of skills are planning skills. They are also universal. There are only two types of social movements in this world. They're either spontaneous or successful, so they can't be both. If they are successful, it's because the elements of strategic planning are applied. So this is just a no-brainer. So some planning skills, and then also there's this another big problem in this is if I have been given $1 every time somebody tells me, oh, we are too busy doing tactics, we don't have time for planning. That go back to Sun Tzu and his useful quotes. Strategy without tactics is just the wishful thinking, though tactics without strategy are just the noise before the defeat. So you need both types of planning. And last but not least important, movements need to understand the phenomenon of violence and why violence doesn't work. And that a nonviolent discipline is a skill. And you can build this skill. And, it's like driving a car. You can learn how to drive. The car may sound complicated or less complicated. In America, it's very easy. You don't even have gears. But in Europe, we do that. But the thing is, these are universal things. And then it depends. Everything else is need-based assessment. Some movements need training in overcoming the oppression because they're operating in a very oppressive environment. Some movements need skill in targeting. So you have this large environmental international movement. How do we connect everything that is happening across the globe and bring our decisive forces to one campaign? And how you pick this target and how you communicate with this target and how you sway this target and how you define victory, how you capitalize on victory. Some movements need more of a strategic brainstorming instructions. I mean, take a look at the contemporary movements, which are very visible. Take a look at the BLM, for example, amazing movement that I strongly support myself. In my opinion, too much focused on only two pillars in a very complex change: the pillar of police and the pillars of symbols of statues and this kind of stuff. Too little looking into the real sources of change, education, and shifting the racism idea in the education system. So this becomes the part of our normal to respect differences. The recycling became the part of our normal through education. My kids are more environmentally aware than my generation was, and your kids would be more environmentally aware than you are. This is inevitable. So why? Because the education shapes the way the next generation is. Another very important pillar in anti-racist struggle is businesses, and how you, like talking about the pay gap and things of that kind, is also. So sometimes some movements are in need in just bringing more things into this wider picture that will help them outline the strategy. Some movements need more guidance on tactics. So it's the part of it, it's universal. It's written in the books. So you train people how to recognize their battlefields, how to build their vision, how to work through the set of pillars and institutions we call pillars of support, because any durable change must be institutional. And then you look at their needs and you try to customize what you teach them to what they need the most. But once again, you teach them how to fish in each of these cases. You don't tell them do that instead of doing this. You tell them, have you been thinking of? And then dig into the case studies. There is no lack of case studies of successful nonviolent movements globally.
Right.
Yeah.
People don't read.
It's all there. Just kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me think of another thing too, when you were saying how, the next generation has, more knowledge and more education, and kind of going along with that, how do you think the knowledge in a blueprint for revolution, or the stuff that you do through Canvas, how do you think that could be incorporated into like school curriculums? Because we think it would be really important information for everyone to learn in order to have like a fully functioning and fair democracy, no matter how young you are. So do you think that could work? How do you think that could work?
Well, this is a dream of my organization, is to not only to make the knowledge about civic resilience user-friendly, but also to incorporate it in the curriculum. And we started small. Once again, you think big, you start small. And we started small. We're doing university courses and seeing how it works on universities. There's obviously a large interest, and there's no lack of interest learning about the social movements in nowadays schools in US, in UK, also in many places in Europe. But I think school curriculum is really important. And one of the examples is, for example, in 2 Nordic countries, now you have a curriculum which teaches you how to recognize and resist fake news. So making you resilient to the internet crap and conspiracy theories, starting in critical thinking starts in elementary or in secondary school. Mm-hmm. So, you can make people more resilient through education. And obviously the reason why I think, not necessarily my book, but so many good books, including the one you mentioned, This is an Uprising, should be the part of school curriculum, is that, defending society, defending your rights, knowing about your rights, it's like learning about the safety in traffic. Because, you may not be in immediate danger of being hit by the train when you're crossing the train with your car, but you need to know the rules not to be hit by the train when you're crossing the train by your car. And when you're learning the basic traffic rules, the first thing you say is that there is a red signal, you don't go across the street. And that training starts, at least with my kids, it started when they were year 3 or 4. So I don't really need to paranoidly keep their hands on when we are approaching the pedestrian. They know what the red means, and they know what the green means. And this is not like I'm anticipating they're going to drive the car anytime soon. But now when they get into bicycle training, it really helps. Mm-hmm. So it's like now I have a little bit more peace of mind when they're riding their bicycles around, because at least I know that, they know what the red sign means. So very similarly, understanding how to fight unjust authority, how to fight bullying, how to fight all the way to how to fight the crazy guy who may come in power in your country and then try to screw up the democracy. This is the train hitting you on the intersection, and the first one is red light. But organizing around the ideas of the nonviolence and mobilizing social networks and building consensus, building support, learning to work within a small team can help you with school bullying. And then it can help you with the president bully. But it's like, the thing is the same things apply. You understand why the people bully. You understand that bully feeds on fear. You understand how to break this fear. You understand why clowns are working better against the neo-Nazis than the angry Antifa people throwing stones at them. If you can build this into the school curriculum, I don't really care which books they are going to read. There are many good books, once again, but I'm very passionate about exploring more impact on these younger generation with this idea. And actually, my first thought would be, in the 21st century, you should be building around the 30-second videos and cartoons rather than the books, because it's a more viable medium, and the attention span is unfortunately far lower. But this is just the vehicle of the message. The thing is, yes, I think you need this type of education, and yes, I think educating people about how you build people power, how you fight for change, and how you oppose bullying is a very important resilience factor for even the very young kids.
I feel like it could be an excellent segue to talking about your love of pranks. And when we discussed the book and we had some of our friends on, we had a whole roundtable discussion of our favorite pranks that were in the book, which was right fun. And I think your new book focuses on that more so. Read that? Oh, I love it. It's a little pocket book. Oh, I'm so excited to get it.
Yes. Power of pranks comes from first of all our passion to do pranks in our own struggle, then understanding that pranks work in many different ways, and then throughout the years finding more and more examples of how different cultures, different movements were using these pranks and how this was effective. So we teamed up. I teamed up with Sophia McLean, an amazing and very clever professor from Penn State University, who has a passion for political satire and actually wrote several great books on political satire, and especially in the Trump era, how this impacts people's resilience to the fake news. For example, if you're having a mind which understands the satire, you're less likely to be susceptible to the QAnon type of things. And I mean, she's a real, psychological, sociological side of this. And we were looking at the worldwide cases of this, and where you're looking at we had all of these anecdotal stories, and we started with pranks in Serbia, like putting Milosevic in a petrol barrel and then inviting people to put the coin in and then hit the petrol barrel, ending up with the police arresting the petrol barrel. You want to go to Russia, take a look at the toy protest, how Putin banned the toy protest in Siberia in 2012. You can type in snowman protest. You can see that in Russia and Belarus last week. Governments arrested people who built snowmen with transparents. I mean, how ridiculous it looks if you're a strong man claiming to have the support of the people and you're afraid of a snowman. So this really is everywhere. So we built this little Pranksters versus Autocrat thing, which is once again to say free from Amazon Kindle, free from Google Books, free from whatever platform exists. I'm not a very big fan of Apple, but you can read it for free. It's like 40 cases, and we were looking not only at the anecdote, it's a fun read, but we were looking also at a little bit of the data. So the data are impressive. We were looking at how this changes narrative. So making your opponent look not only weak, but sometimes stupid also works. And then we see how it puts opponent between the rock and a hard place. And to get away of just the people versus dictator thing, if you live in New York, you need to go to something called the Yes Lab. This is an NYU program run by Yes Men, probably the best pranksters I've ever met, at least on the American continent. And these two guys who are hilarious, amazing, and I mean, I'm very subjective. They're my friends as well. One of them came with another great book called The Beautiful Trouble, which is actually another toolbox for whatever important thing. But these guys are famous for their putting corporations between the rock and the hard place. So what they are actually doing, they're looking at a corporation scandal, let's say Volkswagen, and we just discovered that they were lying about the gas emissions from their cars. So they would come out with a fake press release on behalf, allegedly on behalf of the Volkswagen, saying how sorry they are that they screwed it up. So now this puts Volkswagen between two impossible choices. You have this fake press release, everybody's talking about it. So if you're Volkswagen, what do? You say, no, this is a fake press release. We are not sorry that, because we lied to so many people and sold them cars as green, and actually they're not green at all. Or they can say, yes, we are sorry, and thus grant the pranksters the victory. So these type of dilemma, and then you grain it with a little bit of humor, is what actually work. And it works because of sociological reasons. The humor tends to attract more people. Funny people are the people you love to be around with. And whether this is a party or having a coffee, this is the same thing. It works for psychological reasons. The humor is cool. Everybody wants to be around the people who are cool. Vrata. And then it works for a dilemma reasons, because it puts your opponent between lose and lose, between stupid and weak. And then also the research that Sophie and I digged into is how it boosts membership. So the people look at it. This is something they would do if only they have guts to do it. So they tend to join. Then the replicability, you see snowman in Belarus, boom, there is a snowman in Russia. So there is a 67% of the cases we were looking at. We started with 40, we have more than 100 now. We have a great group of research students. More than 2/3 have been replicated, amazing. So if this works, it's very likely that somebody will try to do this at home, this as seen on TV phenomenon. And this also boosts the creativity, this boosts confidence, this boosts morale. It also influences narratives. The bullies, and there is a whole cluster, we call it cluster. When you have a cluster of cases, so like we call this cluster clowns versus Nazis. So there is a cluster of cases where pranksters actually put alt-right, if you want to put the correct term, or right-wing nuts, if you use Serbian English, into the place where they don't know what to do. So here they want to march on Charlottesville. Well, you take a look at Bundesdale, Germany, a very liberal city in Germany, which was unlucky to be the birthplace of Rudolf Hess, one of the high lieutenants of Adolf Hitler. So every year, the small, calm, liberal place get a throng of people in the black uniforms, marching proudly, celebrating basically the war criminal. And, they're calm and they're scared and they just want this thing to go. And then the local group came out with a great idea that they will turn this Nazi march into a fundraising opportunity. So they organized the local businesses and they organized the local people to donate a certain amount of euros per every 100 meters that the Nazi march make. So now, because the march is announced, they exactly know where these guys would go. So you pass through the first mark, and instead of people being home and afraid or people booing you, you have a throng of the local people standing and applauding you. So basically, more you march, the more money you donate to the organization called Exit Germany, whose main cause is to de-radicalize the Nazis. So by doing what you're doing, you're helping me. And then your alternative is to cancel the march and admit you're defeated. So, this type of dilemma, especially for this groups that kind of crave for conflict, it's really, really effective. And there is a whole cluster of cases on how to address the Proud Boy type of organization with a prank. And a lot of these pranks has been done across the world, and many of them are successful. So there are things which are happening daily as we speak. And one of the beauties of this job and this research is that, every day you learn something new. I was 2 days ago, I was watching the 2 marches in Burma. Burma had a coup. A few days ago, the military who controlled the transition lost the elections, and then they put everybody in jail. And now the people across the Myanmar are protesting to restore their partial democracy, and they're super creative in this. So you're watching at the two different things. So it's like there is this military, and then there is a march of Disney princesses. So the whole village is basically dressed up as characters from the. And now, so these soldiers need to slaughter Disney princesses. So if they told them disperse the crowd, they're actually chasing the princesses. If they stand back, then they let 200 people defy a ban of 5 people or more gathering. So they admit defeat or they disperse the princesses. Then, another city of Burma, people came out with the weird pets. You can't imagine how the people are holding the weird pets. So here is the guy with a python around his neck. And it's a 6 feet python. And he says, my snake is taller than the coup general in power, because the general is very short and he has a big complex for being short. Then the guy next to him has a big iguana around his neck and a transparent saying, speaking of lizard mind, this lizard has a higher IQ than my military leadership. So what do you do with these people? If you arrest them, you admit that you're pissed off and look stupid. If you let them do this, bet there will be more and more doing this. So this type of dilemma thinking is what inspired Pranksters and what inspires us to dig more into these cases. But there are many of them, and a lot of them are super hilarious.
Yeah. We yeah, I think we have some laughs.
Yes. Sorry. We both clicked the comment at the same time, so we didn't
cancel each other out. Story of us. Anyway, yeah. And what I love about it is that there's the laughter element, which is like, how can you not love that? But then there's like often sometimes like an element of love that comes in as well, like in some way. Like I think the one with the Nazi march kind of, it's at the very least, turning that really harsh negative that into like a positive, and it's got to bring the community so much closer together too, which you're going to get more out of that. Yeah. So anyway, I'm definitely excited to get my hands on that book. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, aesthetically, the little book, like it's like I'm gonna keep it in my back pocket and walk around with it.
It's 1 hour read.
1 hour read. Perfect.
Yeah, we'll have to have like a little side book.
If you read it thoroughly, it has roughly 56 pages of read, and the rest are tables and numbers. But it's really easy read.
That's not bad.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we don't want to take up too much of your time. We're almost at an hour. It always goes by so fast. I guess I have like 2 questions, Megan, if you don't mind. So both kind of quick. Like right now with everything going on, we're an online book club. You mentioned about how social media can be a great tool, but it's like our hope to start like have things be online, but start in-person chapters. We're just wondering if you have any tips for how to bring activism from social media to real life. And then also after that, any good like anthems for revolution? Because we know that you're a musician. We both love music as well, and yeah. So any Spotify playlist recommendations?
Speaking of online and offline, it's a long story, but yes, social media are the tools for good and tools for bad as well. But if you want to put it in use as a tool for good, always have in mind that the successful collectivism campaigns always have a leg in the real world. The reason why Ice Bucket Challenge was such a big thing was not because it was a hype of people making funky videos and trolling, pouring the war over their head, but because they were challenging people they know in a real world for donating for the cause. So whatever you do in virtual world to be effective must have a leg or call to action in the real world. So it's not only about clicking on pages which says save polar bears. It's also about following it up with action, like turning your computer on for half an hour and save some energy. So this is how you save polar bears far better than with a click. And Speaking of that, we are witnessing the power of hashtags and stuff like that. But if you want to judge it, never judge it by the level of clicks, likes, or shares. It is actually 70-to-1 ratio. If you have a viral video, 70 people will watch it, 20 people will react to it in some way, but only 2 or 3 people will do things. So it's like, look at the number of the people who are ready to do things and work with these people, recruit with these people, and connect in the real world with these people. So what was the last question? I just lost it.
Any good Spotify playlists that you've been listening to, or for getting
I don't even know what the Spotify is. I'm mildly technologically retarded, and I don't possess iPhone. Just joking. Music is a big part of social mobilization. Music is a big part of the movement identity, and I would for the younger generation, go and listen to a big friend of mine and iconic leader of the BLM named Andre Henry. Follow him on Twitter. He's also writing a book. Don't know where he is with the book, but he has some really, really cool mobilizing hip hop things about the why we should stand for racial injustice and why the people have power. To go back to my playlist, I'm an old man in my late 40s. I think the good music, the music really peaked in 80s or 90s. So none of this or my recommendation will make sense for you guys. But if you want to do something, listen to good music and maybe help the cause, type in Pierre Gabriel, who was the iconic person of my youth, who just came out 40 years after with a remake of his song Biko. You can watch it on YouTube, and by watching it, you're helping the cause. So this is also a very good way that the new media are helping spread stuff. You can make the video, and then you can use the money that comes from YouTube commercials to be donated to the cause. So immediate action, check Andre Henry on Twitter and take a look at some of his work. And then long term, try to dig into this big, important people from 80s and 90s, because this was when the Band-Aid was made, and this were the all of these big musicians were involved in social causes. If you want to do something good now, go and watch this video, Peter Gabriel, Biko, and you will help the cause. So yes, you can help the cause by watching the video. Welcome to the 21st century.
That's great. Okay, cool. And you are on Twitter as at Srdja Popović, right?
I am at Twitter at Srdja Popović, very easy, SRDJA Popović, yes. You can follow me. I tweet about the stuff which is not necessarily super interesting, but sometimes it's cool.
Yeah, I think that's most people on Twitter. I think Kateri froze a little bit.
It's a polar vortex. It's okay. Hope she's not in Texas.
Yeah, no. So I guess I'll just ask a question real quick. Maybe she'll be able to hop back on. But the last thing that we always ask everybody who comes on is what are some books that you would recommend that to everybody? outside of your own?
Yeah, okay. So quick stroll through the people interested in social change. One thing to read, obviously, is Sun Tzu, Art of War. It's free from the internet. Another really interesting book looking closer into my world of dictatorship is a book of William J. Dobson called Dictator's Learning Curve, and inside the global struggle of democracy. Innovative thinking, social movement in businesses, Greg Suttel, Cascades. Thinking out of the box, and this is probably the next book you should be reading, and I think this is a very good. It has a little bit on the social mobilization. It's more about thinking out of the box. Adam Grant, Originals. It's an amazing book, and then of course some of those that we already mentioned in the show. The things like Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals, really good book per se. And then, of course, two books that marked my childhood. One is, of course, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and Hobbit. So you can read them in the bulk. Don't only watch movies, but read books. And then the book I rediscovered after years and years, something, when you get in certain age, you come back to the books from your that you read when you were in teens or 20s, and try to see how they impact. How do they look to you? I don't know if I have it here.
I'm back from the polar vortex.
Yeah. Another great author you want to research, Peter Pomerantsev.
Oh.
You want to see how the trolling from Russia spilled over into the QAnon type of things.
Okay.
This guy is brilliant. And then this is not a propaganda. He has two books. The easier read is called, both are very easy read. He's a really good writer. The first one is called Nothing's Real and Everything is Possible, and speaks more about the Russia and how this new virtual reality, not based on facts, actually was invented in a lab. And then once the virus spread, how this impacts thinking in a post-truth world. So the second one is called This Is Not a Propaganda. What I mentioned was when I was living here for the first month, I found this book in this very different thing, and this is more of the philosophy and anthropology. And this is the guy who actually shaped my youth. His name is Carlos Castaneda. And there is a stray of 6 books about the knowledge of Yaqui Indians in Mexico. And this is a very interesting intersection of anthropology and religion, which shaped a lot of young minds in 80s and 90s. And it's a very interesting way about how you look at the world. And it draws all elements of psychology and teachings and the religion and use of psychoactive substances. I mean, it was really big late 70s, but reading it again, it really outlines some of the life principles I think I'm very passionate about. So enough for me. That's the whole month of reading.
Right. It's half our year.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm glad I was able to hop back on. Sorry, guys.
Yes.
Very cool. Well, thank you I'm glad I got to hear those book recommendations. Also, if you wouldn't mind giving our love to Masha.
Yes,
we will. I will. She just
yeah.
left with our little 4-year-old named Leah. The princess. They just left home.
Oh, cool.
Well, we'll definitely give her a love. We are big fans.
Yeah, also big fans of her. So yes.
Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. We've learned a lot. I know I'm going to be thinking about everything we talked about today, and seeing how we can kind of start implementing even more of that in the book club.
Yeah, we'll write up a whole report and send it to you about our
Absolutely. Keep on reading, keep on thinking how to change the world, and I mean, dare to do it. Activism itself doesn't need to be very productive, but getting involved into social action really changes a person because it gives you new purpose, it gives you new friends, It plugs you into the very interesting circles of people. And if you succeed even in the smallest thing, it gives you a very, very interesting shape of the self-confidence, which may help you with other things in your life, which I think is really, really important in your 20s. So don't do there and try to change things. It's important. It fulfills you, but moreover, it's fun and cool to do it.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
All right. We'll say
Bye.
goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Good luck, guys. Thank you for
Bye.
invitation.